Commissioner Seal, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Thank you. How are you?
Good. You're welcome. Okay. We're not quite ready yet, but we will let you know when we are. It is live on YouTube, just so you know.
Yeah, I'm going to go on YouTube now.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you for everything.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, if I can have your attention, we'll go ahead and begin. We'll call the Juvenile Welfare Board to order. For those of you following along closely, we were to begin our meeting today with the Finance Committee, but we are going to flip and begin with our board meeting first. We are waiting for one more member of our board who happens to be a member of the Finance Committee to arrive. So we'll begin with our board meeting, calling it to order, and I will ask Mike McCurrick to lead us in the pledge. Thank you for everyone changing schedules to have our board meeting in the afternoon before our first trim hearing that will begin at 5:15. I'd like to remind everyone that Commissioner Seal is on the line, and in order for Commissioner Seal to hear the proceeds of our meeting today, when you're speaking, I'll give you a heads up that it's important to keep your microphones on. So let's begin the meeting with the acknowledgement. I see we have some guests in the room, very important guests, Cooperman Bogue winners, and for that I'll turn it to Linda Leedy to introduce our winners.
Thank you, Chair. Now more than ever during the pandemic, those who work to give children brighter futures deserve recognition. The Juvenile Welfare Board is honoring social service professionals who consistently go above and beyond to put children first, especially in these challenging times. This month, we're honoring 3 special individuals with a Kids First Cooperman Bogue Award. Let me begin with Ernest Cross. Ernest is a foster grandparent volunteer with Seniors in Service of Tampa Bay. Ernest, or Grandpa Cross as he's known, tutors and mentors Pinellas County students to help build literacy and social emotional skills. In prior years, he worked with children and teachers in their classroom. But with COVID, Ernest learned, like the rest of us, how to do Zoom to continue serving students who needed him more than ever. This was especially true of one 5th grade boy whose father was absent and whose mother was in prison. In true superhero form, Ernest zoomed in, literally and figuratively, to make a difference in this young boy's life. Through their mutual love of art, drawing superhero figures together, Ernest patiently cracked the tough exterior to gain the student's trust, helping him better cope and improve academically. The bond grew so deep that the young student requested extra tutoring time and begged Grandpa Cross to continue with him as he successfully graduated to middle school. Congratulations on receiving this award. Would you like to say anything?
Well, I spent 20 years working in the Department of Corrections, and I often thought about where a lot of young men would have ended up if someone had been able to talk to them and speak to them along the way. So that was an opportunity that I had, and I was glad to take it. So thank you for the award. I appreciate it. And I still don't think I deserve it, but I appreciate it.
You do, you do. Nanette Friend is our next Kids First winner, but wouldn't you know it, she got called for jury duty today and then got selected for a trial. So she's sitting in a courtroom like across the way here, and in her stead is the executive director for the Family Center on Deafness, Anthony Redeja, who did nominate Nanette for this award. She serves as their youth and family support specialist, delivering academic and enrichment programs, and serving as a bridge between schools and families. Nanette often puts the needs for clients above her own. She is tenacious and thinks outside the box, refusing to give up until a solution is found. Not only has Nanette impacted the center's 70-plus families through her one-on-one services, she has also successfully written and secured nearly $60,000 in grants to help the center expand its reach. During COVID, Nanette quickly pivoted to tutor youth via Zoom. I see a trend. She then went the extra mile to meet with them safely and socially distanced outside their homes for those who needed more personal interaction. She even set up Zoom movie watch parties so her middle schoolers felt less isolated and could stay connected. In the words of one of Nanette's students' parents, she said she is amazing, thoughtful, and rocks just like a rock star. So please express our congratulations to Nanette for receiving this award. Anthony, do you have anything you wanted to say about?
Thank you. No, just on behalf of the County Center on Deafness Board, staff, we just wanted to say thank you for recognizing Nanette and for all of her work going above and beyond. We're grateful for this opportunity to celebrate her accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Dina Mckenna. Dina is a Pinellas County School social worker who was previously assigned to 2 elementary schools and is now part of the PATHS program this school year, which is helping to integrate children with anxiety and other mental health concerns back into the school setting. Dina's primary focus is always the child. She advocates for their well-being on a daily basis and forms trusting relationships with parents. She also helps connect families with resources that improve their quality of life and education. At the start of the pandemic, when schools were first shut down, Dina put her own fears aside to make home visits to check on her students' well-being and to help them navigate the new virtual school world online. She organized the student engagement tracking system at her school, helping facilitate and brainstorm ways to get students engaged in online learning, a task we all know that was very difficult. She frequently stays after hours to meet with parents, even though she has her own small children at home, and she gives up her free time to do paperwork, allowing her to be present for parents, teachers, and families during school hours. She is a bright light, compassionate, and selfless, and is everyone's cheerleader. Congratulations on receiving this award. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's the high spot for our board members to meet you and hear about your stories as we recognize those that go above and beyond in support of our children most at need. And I can't thank you enough on behalf of all of us. And what I do want to remind you is that I think there's a photographer in the lobby waiting to take some pictures. If you would like to do that, this would be a great time for you to transition to a photography shoot. I'll apologize in advance for a little bit of coughing going on. I have returned from being away and I picked up some sort of an allergy, perfectly fine except for this nagging little cough that's lingered since I'm back. So let's move on to item 3. our consent agenda for the meeting. I need a motion to accept the consent agenda, and then a second, please.
So move.
Mike? And
Second.
thank you, Judge Moore. And all board members approve the consent agenda?
Aye.
This motion carries. Moving to our action items, our first item is actually our election of our board. It's hard to believe it's September, and today is the historic time that Juvenile Welfare Board elects our officers, usually every 2 years. The officers have moved through positions of chair, vice chair, and secretary. The following slate of officers have agreed to serve beginning October 1st, 2021 through September 30, 2023. And that's Mr. Michael McCurrick as chair, Honorable Judge Patrice Moore as vice chair, and Councilman Rick Butler as secretary. This is the time where we ask the rest of the board members if there's any other nominations from the floor before we entertain a motion to accept the slate as presented. Hearing none, I'll take a motion to accept the slate as presented.
Move to accept the slate as presented.
Thank you, Dr.
Second.
Grego. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Jim Milliken. And at this moment, all opposed, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? This motion will carry. The board also has the responsibility to appoint an at-large member to serve on the executive committee. Currently, Chief Milliken is serving in that capacity. Are there any other nominations from the board for the at-large seat of the executive committee of the board? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to appoint Chief Milliken, the continuing at-large member of the executive committee.
So move.
Thank you,
Second.
Mike, and thank you, Dr. Grego. All in favor?
Aye.
This motion carries. So now we have the Finance Committee. Also, the responsibility of the board once a year is to make sure that we our Finance Committee is consisting of 5 members. The current members, as of this year, are Mr. Mike McCurrick, Councilman Rick Butler, Division Chief Jim Milliken, Brian Ongst, and Commissioner Seal. If the current members are willing to continue to serve, we need a nomination to replace Mr. McCurrick as a voting member. Is there anyone from the board table that would be interested in serving on the Finance Committee once we turn our fiscal year October 1st? All right, I'm not hearing anybody raising up that hand. I will admit to you that I have decided that I would step back onto the Finance Committee as a voting member because the chairman is an ex officio member of the Finance Committee. So with that, in order to vote me back onto the Finance Committee, I will have to turn the meeting over to Mike McCurrick to make that motion and get me approved.
Can I have a motion to appoint Mrs. Ralston to the Finance Committee?
Motion to appoint.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The opposed, same sign. You're now on the Finance Committee.
All right. Well, I think that actually takes us through the election of the officers, that it's a duty of the board to make that transition. So it's kind of fun as I sit here, and it happened before I even blinked that today will be my last meeting. So it's kind of fun, and I welcome and congratulate Michael McCurrick and Jim and Rick Butler, who's not here, and of course Judge Moore. Welcome and honor and recognize your service coming up. I'll move on to the action item B, which is to approve the removal of surplus and obsolete inventory. Laura Peel, would you take that agenda item, please?
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Laura Peel, Director of Information Technology, and I'm here to seek approval for the removal of surplus and obsolete inventory. So normally, this is something we look at every 6 months, but with COVID, it's kind of put on delay for a little bit. The last time we actually looked at our inventory was December 2019. However, we're still replacing equipment for employees and servers and other items that we need for IT and the building. So at this time, you should have the memo that has the items listed on there. All equipment that's listed is of no net value. Most of it's being replaced because it's expired warranty or obsolete. And we do have a couple of items that are broken. All good equipment that will be wiped, and then what we do first is we donate it to our funded agencies. If they are not in need of any of the equipment, we donate it to another 501c3. Equipment that is broken gets recycled. So that's all I have today. Any questions?
Thank you, Laura. At this point, I'd like to call for a motion to approve this agenda item.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. McCurrick, and thank you,
Second.
Mr. Milliken. And all in favor?
Aye.
This motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to action item 4D, approve the release of a non-operating and capital request for, oh, I skipped C, thank you. The pen just moved right down there. Approve the award for Reach Out and Read to Miami Dade Family Learning Partnership. Dr. Morrison.
Thank you.
Rodriguez.
Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez, I'm the Chief Evaluation and Innovation Officer for JWB, and it is my pleasure to put this action item before you. Just a little brief history. Some of you may remember at the JWB Children's Conference, Dr. Nafsaria talked about his initiation and development of the Reach Out and Read program in Wisconsin, and is a very enthusiastic supporter of it. So we are putting forth a request to support the continued work of Reach Out and Read in Pinellas County. The request is for $207,000, and I'm looking for the additional amount, $207,508. Did I remember that correctly? Okay, it's broken down in two ways. Let me just talk about the budget, and then I'll tell you what it's going to be used for and who it's going to. So it's $130,000 for books, $77,000 for staffing, and that's composed of both some part-time and full-time staff who will primarily be doing developmental work and technical assistance with the pediatricians, so that they know how to work with the parents in using the books to reach out to their children. So the whole fidelity to this particular model depends on the capacity of pediatricians to promote reading and work with parents to encourage reading. So there is actually a training protocol that goes along with that. And so some of the funding is to request the training protocol. The sole source would go to the Family Learning Partnership, which is a 501c3 organization and has been the sole Reach Out and Read affiliate for Florida since 2017. At the current time, they are providing Reach Out and Read program with 6 medical sites in Pinellas County. So this funding would help to enhance the training of the pediatricians and provide additional books in those 6 sites. They're also planning to add a new site with the St. Petersburg Pediatrics, which is at the 49th Street location, so that we would have 7 sites in Pinellas County where Reach Out and Read would be provided. I had the opportunity to sit on a couple of meetings with representatives of the organization. I was very impressed with their credentials, their experience, their enthusiasm. So I think we've got an excellent team implementing a very, very strong program. And they are asking support from JWB to do that. They are almost uniquely qualified for this as the principal provider in all of those sites. So with all those things in mind, we're asking for your approval for a sole source allocation for this particular organization. Let me stop and ask if there are any questions or concerns from the board that we need to address.
did they anticipate how many young folks?
I'm sorry, Dr. Grego, I can't hear you.
Did they anticipate how many parents or how many families they would be able to reach for this
I
allocation?
still
of
can't hear your
200?
question.
They,
How many people will be, they'll be able to?
Oh, the statistics on how many they'll be able to reach. Okay, that's
what do
a,
they anticipate their,
all right.
their scope
At the
of
present
influence?
time, they're serving 9,530 children in the existing sites.
Oh, for the, okay,
The new site would add 2,000 more children.
okay, thank you.
And I should also add that the average cost per child is $18.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have not only the distance, I have some hearing loss in this one ear.
It's all right.
So to follow up on that question, so the first number that you gave was the Florida number for the, you said they are the provider for the state of Florida.
They are, but the numbers I gave were for Pinellas County. They have 6 sites in Pinellas, and they're going to be adding a 7th.
Okay, okay.
That's a lot of kids in Pinellas County, yeah.
I want to make sure, I'd like to make sure that there are no other questions, comments, or concerns before we call for the motion.
Just one question, so we can clarify. Were they were, if this is a sole program, so the question was, were there others that were reviewed?
I'd like to make sure that there are no other questions, comments, or concerns before we call for the motion. I'm Karen Seal. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, let Karen. Karen, can you hear me? Karen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you wanted to say something?
So yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can. Okay, so.
You wanted to say something?
Yes, I did. I was just curious. So they're already doing the service in Pinellas County without being reimbursed?
They're- What they are asking us for are, we're getting a lot of echo, I don't know.
YouTube is on and she, at home, and she needs to turn it off.
Karen, can you mute your YouTube while you're talking, because we're getting a lot of feedback?
Okay, want to try it now? All right. They're asking, yes, they're providing services in Pinellas County. One of the challenges they have is to meet the benchmark for full fidelity to the model. And some of that is related to the fact that they're not fully staffed up enough to ensure that all of the pediatricians are adequately trained. So some of this is enhancement for technical assistance and training. And then they're adding an additional site. So the other amount of the money is to cover the additional children and families who are going to be served. So yes, they're doing a good job. They want to do a more thorough job, and they would like to add an additional site. So that's really what the request is for.
Karen, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I'm not sure. I guess I'm willing to do this for a year, but if they're already providing the service, then we're using public tax dollars to basically supplement their budget. I mean, that's quite a bit of money for one more site.
It's not just for one more site, though. The majority of the budget is for the enhancement in pediatrician training and additional books. The books are the key. They need additional books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They're a 501c3.
and there's an additional 2,000 children that'll be added to this.
Right.
I'm not sure I can support this, but I see the value of it for maybe a year, but once the pediatricians are trained, then why would we, other than
Well, other than adding additional,
need to do this?
I think it would be other than adding additional sites, and they are adding one additional site. And I think to satisfy, your issue, we can certainly do a very thorough analysis and evaluation of this at the end of the year to consider whether we want to continue it or expand it. And I would say that some of the additional staff people that they're hiring are not only going to be providing TA, they're going to be assessing and evaluating the fidelity, and our evaluators will be assessing the fidelity as well.
Barbara, I think part of the question is, maybe I'm wrong, but if I'm interpreting it right, they are already being paid by the state of Florida for the 6 other sites that are in Pinellas, is that correct?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Do you know where their current funding is coming from, Karen?
I don't know where the current funding, but we can find that,
Okay, I think
Yeah.
that's part of it.
I don't
mean,
think
they're being paid.
by the
But
state.
there's no staff currently, so there's no staff that are providing any oversight training at the current time to the 5 sites.
Okay, well, there are 5 sites available today with no staff at all? Is that correct?
I think it's a matter of intensity. I think my sense when talking to them is that they've done some training of the staff, but what they're saying is we don't have fidelity at all of our sites, was the conversation we had with them. That's a matter of intensity. And so what they're asking for is additional staff for additional hours to be able to do more training and support of the pediatricians so they in turn can work more effectively with the children.
So just so I'm clear, they're being paid right now for these other sites by someone, I'm not sure which, whether it's a state or anyone else.
Yeah.
We're proposing to add an additional sites, which will impact an additional 2,000 children, and an expansion of the training program
For all of the sites.
all of the sites, and pediatricians who have not participated. Is that
Well,
correct?
they have some pediatricians who have participated. At the new site will be pediatricians who have not participated, because that's a brand-new site.
So I'm reading the letter, the memo regarding the support of this, and it says the contract would bring the 5 sites up to full fidelity and expand the services to an additional 2,000 children through the additional site, which is St. Petersburg Pediatrics. The sites selected by Reach Out and Read Pinellas are clinics or hospitals serving children most at risk for poor and emergent literacy and early school failure.
Yeah.
So what you've mentioned the word to bring them up to full fidelity, as well as adding the additional
site.
and an additional 2,000 children over and above the children they're currently serving.
That is correct.
So the question on the table that we don't have an answer to is where their funding comes aside from this 207,500.
Where their pre-existing funding is coming from. We'd have to find that out. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, Linda?
On the website for the Reach Out and Read Florida in Miami, is funded by the Children's Trust.
I'm sorry.
It's
The
funded by
Miami's Children's Trust, which is the Children's Services Council in Miami.
Okay. And I look back to Mr. McCurrick. You had a question on the table before Commissioner Seal.
Yeah, that was the question. I think we're kind of clarifying along the way where their funding might have been coming for the other balance of the programs that they have out there. And I think you've answered that Miami is being funded through the Miami Trust.
Yeah, they've worked almost exclusively in Miami in addition to coming to Pinellas. And that's the Children's Services. So in a sense, it's the same type of funding source as JWB would be.
Yeah, it just, I think I got a little confused on the Florida reach. How
Well, they're
far
the
out
sole provider in the state of Florida. This program
only-
works in other states. They are the sole provider in the state of Florida.
But currently, it's only being done in Miami-Dade and now
Miami
here.
and Pinellas.
And then they're the only one doing it across the state.
Okay, I'm going to call for the motion, please.
I motion that we move forward with the sole source and review in a year, just to see how things are progressing. to ensure that we're getting the value and the children are
And
getting
I would
the
hope
support
that we
they
would do that in any case. So,
Okay, a second, I see Mr. Milliken's lights on. Okay, all in favor of the motion with the edit that Mr. McCurrick put in about the one-year evaluation? All in favor?
Aye.
This motion carries.
thank you.
Anyone opposed? Commissioner Seal, are you, I didn't hear,
Yes, I'm opposed. Commissioner Steele is opposed.
just a point of clarification. Colleen? I wasn't sure. I just want to make sure that if we're not in person present, does that vote count?
Yes, Commissioner Seal, her vote counts. We have a quorum in person, and she has extraordinary circumstances that permit her to vote and participate electronically.
Thank you. I thank you. I just wanted to make sure that technically we were correct. So
Yes,
we have one opposed to this, but this motion carries. Thank you. Now we're in action item 4D. We're coming back to approving the release of the non-operating and capital request for applications. And Laura Brock, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Staff is seeking approval to release this RFA. To remind you, these are provided to organizations that we currently fund, the 501c3s that can apply for these funds. We have increased the applications to not to exceed 150,000, so they can apply for up to 2 projects, a minimum of 10,000 per project, total combined not to exceed 150,000. The budget amount that we have set aside for this is $1.75 million, which, to remind you, a year ago when we added to the funds to be able to accommodate all of the scores that had reached 65, we ended up dispersing $1,486,000. So this proposal is for the RFA to be $1,175,000. It is to respond to potential increased needs related to COVID-19, and we are encouraging the agencies to apply for additional technology to strengthen their agencies to diversify their revenue sources and not be so dependent on us when we used to keep track of a lot of information when we had GEMS. And now that we've switched to Amplifund, we're wanting the agencies to get their own systems and kind of handle a lot of that information. The memo outlines the evaluation committee that will be serving on this RFA, as well as the evaluation criteria and weights and the timeline. We are hoping to move through this process and be able to execute an amendment on or before February 1st, 2022. I'll turn it back to Madam Chair.
Any questions, concerns, clarification? Hearing, I see a light.
No, I was going
Chief
to, you sir,
Milliken?
just move to accept the RFA.
I have a motion to approve. A second, please.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. We're action item 4E, which is to approve the award for North Pinellas Children's Medical Center Agreement. Linda Leedy, thank you for heading to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Children's Mental Health Initiative, I am requesting a purchasing policy waiver and award in the amount of $388,180 to North Pinellas Children's Medical Center to fund 3 clinical positions, 1.5 support positions to expand our initiative to our first private pediatric practice. As you may recall, when this initiative began, our design team and steering committee agreed that one way to help our overly burdened behavioral health system in Pinellas County would be to train pediatricians to be able to diagnose and treat low to moderate mental and behavioral health issues that they see in their practices. With the integration of behavioral health specialists into the practices, then they can more immediately support those families' needs and the children's needs with an easy handoff down the hall in the same practice as opposed to contributing to the long wait that people suffer for services in, with our mental health providers who are, as I mentioned, really overwhelmed. This behavioral health integration model is recommended by both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. We began our first integration with Pinellas County's only federally qualified health center, which is the Community Health Centers of Pinellas. They receive federal funding to treat patients in primary care services in underserved areas, and they have 12 locations throughout Pinellas County, 6 of which see children. We brought training to all of the community health center pediatricians through the REACH Institute, and additional participants in that training included pediatricians from this North Pinellas Children's Medical Center. So they have been involved with this process pretty much from the very beginning. And the team now does weekly staffings with multi-agency, multidisciplinary teams on a Wednesday afternoons, and Dr. Weber from the North Pinellas Children's Medical Center participates on those regularly. At this point, they are ready to join the initiative. We've had numerous conversations with them, walked through our contract with them, and they are anxious to start serving children in their Palm Harbor location with the 10 pediatricians that they have. Any questions?
I'm going to comment that I know you've been waiting a long time for this, and I also know the Herculean work that went on behind the scenes to get this to this point today. So I will call for the vote, call for questions, but I just want to recognize that this has been a long time coming and a huge advancement to our children's mental health initiative. So I'll open up now for any questions, concerns, or comments to Linda before we go for the motion.
I just want to make a comment. I'll say thank you for your hard work on this. Mental health is certainly one of the top of my list on things going on in Pinellas County with our children and adults, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. McCurrick?
I'd like to make a comment as well. As we all know how difficult this has been and how hard you worked to pull this coalition of organizations together to come to this point, which is relatively quickly in a very bureaucratic time frame, I guess, if you think about what it took to get all the groups together and the outside players and the like. So I commend you and the team for all the hard work that you've done, and I think this is a major step forward, and I thank all who participated for all their hard work and that they've done, and I look for much more success from this going forward. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. COVID, of course, had threw a little wrench in the works as well, but we're happy to be moving forward.
Yes, Sarah.
Just like to mimic the accolades that you're getting. They're well received, and I remember when you initially presented this as a concept. So congratulations. It's been a journey, but not really long in the scope of, you're right, with all of the moving parts. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. And obviously, once this practice gets up and running and we kind of get it figured out with our first private practice, we intend to continue to build, and maybe St. Pete Pediatrics will be the next one.
Okay, at this time, I will call for a motion.
I motion to approve.
I see a second. Thank you, Ms. Mallow. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries, and again, congratulations. At this time, we'll move on to the discussion items, and the first discussion item is pretty exciting. Something we've been talking about for some time is the Dillinger-McCabe Putting Children First Award. If you recall, we voted last February to create the Leadership Award honoring longstanding former members Bernie McCabe and Bob Dillinger. Both men formidable leaders and fierce advocates for children. While they didn't always agree, and we know that right here at the board table, they always found common ground when it came to making children a priority. Working with our Juvenile Welfare Board consultant, Dr. Mary Grace Duffy, We've researched dozens of local and national awards similar in scope to this award, and the selection criteria for the Dillinger McCabe Putting Children First Award was finalized not too long ago. I know you've received it. The selection committee is comprised of myself as the chair, Mike McCurrick, Jim Sewell. He'll be serving in the role of a former board member. And we have representatives from both of our families, Bob Dillinger and Denise McCabe will be serving with us to round out our selection committee. We recently met to approve the nominations selection criteria. The call for nominations was released in August, and the promotion of the award is underway. We're seeking nominations for the most impactful leader we can find, living or deceased, who has made a significant difference in Pinellas County for children and families. Someone who has demonstrated and proven over time embodies the qualities of Bernie McCabe and Bob Dillinger. The specific nomination criteria has been included in your packet, and I know you've received it, so I'm not going to spend time to go over the material. We do ask you for a couple of things. We ask you to spread this award among your network. It was sent to you by April. April's here in the room, I believe. It was sent to you for your own information, but if you could send it out to your network, that will broaden our reach. We also ask you personally to consider an individual for the Leadership Award. Make a nomination yourself or partner with someone who could make that nomination. Nominations will be accepted as of now right up until Friday, October 1st, 2021 at 5 p.m. I do want to put out a little, I call it floating a balloon. I think I use that example quite a bit. I want to let you know that at this point we have canceled the event that we were going to recognize our leaders. That was November 12th. It just seemed like the very appropriate thing to do, given our COVID numbers growing so dramatically in the state of Florida as well as here in Pinellas. So because the recognition of the winner won't necessarily take place on November 12th, we're going to just keep these extraordinary circumstances surrounding the pandemic in mind, and you may see an extension of that deadline from October 1st. Both Bob Dillinger's has been notified and Denise McCabe, they've been notified of the cancellation of the event and the possibility of extending the deadline. Measurably relieved and grateful to hear that there will not be an in-person event. And so we wanted to share that information with you before we get too far down this line. With that, I just will open up if there's any questions, comments, or concerns. But at least I feel as if, as a board, we've been brought up to date on the important work from this award. Any comments? I see Dr. Grego. Any comment?
I was just giving you a thumbs up because it's a very exciting award, and look forward to participating. Yeah, no, thank you for taking the lead on this.
Well, thank you, and we're very concerned that we don't want the excitement of this award to be buried with cancellations of events and not have the appropriate forum to do the recognition. So with that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion item B, summary of changes of our FY22 budget, and I'll turn it back over to Laura Brock.
Thank you. We discussed at the July 8th board meeting, and the board approved the proposed millage rate of 0.8981. And we informed you that that yielded approximately $85 million in ad valorem revenues. And our budget at the time, we had discussion, came in at $127,564. Since July 8th, there has been some changes, modifications, some tweaking, if you would. And those of you who were at the Finance Committee meeting back on August 12th, you heard a lot of these changes that we went through. But today I have presented, and I apologize that the schedule that was to be attached to the memo didn't make it in. until later today, but it's at your table as well. So that identifies all the changes between the July 8th preliminary budget that you received and the preliminary budget that we are proposing today. The changes include some additional programs that have had some expansions, some increases to other areas, some net changes to administration. So the net effect of all of these changes were $1,134,000. Also, the change that occurred is based on the continuing operations of our current fiscal year. The ending fund balance for our current year is what rolls into the beginning fund balance of next year. So those numbers have been updated accordingly as well. So the proposed preliminary budget now is coming in at $127,958,000. So it doesn't look like a big change, but the change in the total expenditures increased from $91 million to $92 million. Keep in mind, when we were looking at all the different programs and what the expansions have done, factoring in the future programming dollars as well, we have actually factored in an increase in additional services, whether expanded or new, of about $12.8 million going into next fiscal year. The reason we don't see that number pop out on your page in front of you is because we've also defunded some programs and decreased some programs. So, for example, the Pinellas Community Foundation, the Family Eviction Program, that went away, and that was about a $3 million budget item. The Learning Empowered Quelly, that was $2.9 million that we decided to terminate based on a corrective action plan. In other areas, those came in at about $7.5 million. So the net, we've been very busy, and I know we've talked about, having all these procurements and being busy, but we've definitely been busy with the expansions that you all have approved back in May and June as we continue to do that and move forward. You also have attached to the memo is the current budget as we see it. We are proposing utilizing $6.87 million of the prior year fund balance amount. So when we look at the current fund balance, we include all the prior year fund balance. We look at our expenditures, program-related, administrative as well, and then our remaining fund balance amount. So we are budgeting, dipping into, if that's the right word, your prior year fund balance of $6.87 million. You can see the other schedules have continued to been updated, reminding you that the capital RFA that we just voted on for $1,750,000, that's included in the section relative to community capacity building. So that is included in our program expenses. And then you also have in front of you the alphabetical budget program allocations as well, and the forecasts have been updated accordingly. So now would be the time to ask any questions. I know we've got the trim hearing at 5:15 to discuss the resolutions for the millage rate and for this preliminary budget.
I see no lights. Everybody's comfortable with where we are as we, in just about an hour or so, get into our trim hearing, our first trim of 2. So we're good. Thank you, Laura. Thanks the team for the Herculean, once again, amount of work that's gone into the budget. We've been discussing it for several months, so I think we're probably all feeling very confident with where we're going with this budget. Let's move on to the next item. This is action item 5, discussion, and we're down to C, which is the intent to sole source the new Quality Learning Initiative Quelly site in Tarpon Springs to our club. And once again, we'll turn this over to Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez. You'll give us an update on this.
Thank you very much. This move that we're taking and proposing and offering for discussion, I would say is a very well-reasoned one from some very in-depth analysis of what has happened with our approach to Quelly in the past. And you might remember that in March, when I was doing the presentation on emerging 0 to 3 initiatives, we talked about the lessons learned that we squeezed out of our first approach to Quelly. And essentially, the major things were it was too ambitious. We should have started smaller. That it was harder for providers to build up with something with both that depth at the scope that we were asking them to do. So you'll see in this request, we are going to try the approach again, drawing on lessons learned with a sole source in a single site. So we think that this is probably going to be a better approach to really implementing and evaluating QELI this time around. And the details were provided to you in item 5C, but let me just highlight a few things. This is really part of our strategy in the strategic plan to invest in the expansion of capacity for high-quality childcare for children 0 to 3 in areas of historically low opportunity, working in partnership with the Early Learning Coalition. So part of the first conversation we had in developing this recommendation was to have our staff work with ELC to see if they could recommend some providers who might pick up the mantle this time around. And there was actually only one provider who stepped forward with any interest in capacity, and that was our club. We've had a lot of experience with our club. Their reputation in the community is very well established. We also wanted to be sensitive to placing this center, which would be for infants and toddlers, in a place that does not currently have, and almost any place does not have current provision for this population. But we did some research on needs and looking at demographics and settled on Tarpon Springs. So you will see that in your packet, there was a map that showed where this is going to be sited in Tarpon Springs, where our club already has a center. The other thing that was important about our club, and this was an issue which came up in prior QELI, is that the requirements for serving infants and toddlers are much stricter than older children. They have higher requirements for teachers carrying a lower ratio of children, which gets to be very expensive, which is one reason why we don't have very much childcare for very, very young children. So our club is willing to do that to meet our strict QELI requirements, which you all had a copy of and which we discussed before. And what was most important is that they have the space to create an early childhood classroom without having to go out and either construct and or rent and modify another space, which adds significantly to the cost. So that we felt if they could meet our QELI provisions, be able to access a space without a great deal of difficulty. We have a provider that is well-respected and honestly was the only one that stepped forward that was willing to do this time around. For all those reasons, we're requesting that we do a sole source allocation to our club. On the second page of the memo, there is a timeline for when this would be implemented. If we agreed to go in this direction today, and the program would start actually on August 1st of 2022. And you can see the steps outlined in between in terms of the calendar of action.
I just wanted to add that there are 2 other QELI sites that we support in Pinellas County. One is in Mid-County and one is in South St. Petersburg. So geographically, that was also part of the thinking that we ought to place this time in Tarpon Springs, in North County.
Right.
Beth, could you remind us where the 2 sites are, Mid and South? Just a range of where they are. Oh, Karen?
One is the Y. Lealman Preschool, and the other one is our club, Lou Williams, in South St. Petersburg.
Mm-hmm. Let me just add, too, that I think this is a chance for us to do this in a better and more informed way, which is really, I think, a fairer test of our QELI model. without some of the administrative and logistical barriers that existed the first time around.
I see Dr. Grego.
Yeah, the one that's at the technical college works out very well because the family and parents are also able to get some job skills there while their children are their infants or babies are being watched. So that's great. And I think this is long overdue to have something in Tarpon Springs too, and the need is certainly growing. Confused that this is an intent or a sole source or just their only response? I mean, which is two different, there are other agencies that give this, but they were the only respondents, right?
That's correct.
I have a follow-up question.
Please.
And so can you give me the years that the Mid and South County have been operational? Are they both just completing 1 year? Again, Karen.
No, they're longer than that.
Right.
Yeah.
Our club, and I'm looking at Judy Patrick, and 6 years, our club Lou Williams location, which Dr. Grego just mentioned.
Is that the one at Northeast High School?
No, it's the one at
P-TECH?
Pinellas Technical College in St. Pete. It's probably
7 years.
7. Yeah, wow, time's going fast. Yeah, I remember establishing it with our club. They're terrific partners. So,
Okay.
Yeah, it's been, I guess, 7 years. It's been a while.
And the other one?
And then why Lealman, I would need to look up exactly, but I believe it's
About
3 years. We're nearing 3 years.
Okay, so just looking ahead at the establishment of, assuming we get the motion and the vote, then looking ahead, we will have one Mid, South, and North County, and I'm going to give recognition and kudos to you, Barbara, for your leadership here at Juvenile Welfare Board, because I believe with the evaluation and the more intense follow-up of all three of these, we should be able to replicate and duplicate the best of the three.
Absolutely.
And go forward in a very efficient manner, if not next year, year after.
Exactly.
So-
I think starting smaller based on lessons learned. And, we'll be paying a lot of attention to process, things around leadership, staffing, all of those things which sometimes are not quite so apparent came up to the surface. And we've had some discussions, and our club has a good track record in this area. And I think that we will be evaluating it extremely intensively before we recommend any kind of further replication.
Okay, I'm overjoyed.
Thank
To
you.
see the rollout today of several key initiatives that we've been talking about for several months, if not years, and to see these now fully being implemented is really.
I really appreciate your support. Thank you.
You are welcome. All right, and no vote needed. We're moving forward to the presentation for today with a huge welcome to Karen Bogus, our new Chief Program Officer, who'll give us an update on our strategic plan, prevention of child abuse and neglect, affectionately known as PCAN.
So thank you. Good afternoon. I am Karen Bogus, Chief Program Officer. And please let me know that you can hear me. I'm trying to project here. Okay. And I will be co-presenting this afternoon with Megan Seals, who is a Senior Technical Program Evaluator, and we'll be presenting on prevention of child abuse and neglect, which we affectionately call PCAN, and the results from fiscal year 20. So our objectives today is we're going to review JWB-funded programs, participant demographics, outcomes, and then we'll review the strategies that are located in our strategic plan and discuss our current efforts as well as future efforts in this area. So our overall strategic goal is for children served by JWB-funded PCAN programs that they will grow up and thrive in safe and healthy environments. And this next slide shows the exactly how it is in our strategic plan, the program level outcomes as well as the county level measure. Now today I'm not going to go into the Family Services Initiative or the campaign for preventable child deaths, only because those are going to be future presentations. But today we will focus on parenting skills as well as children who are free of abuse and neglect during and after services in our programs. So when parents lack support, when they feel isolated and are impacted by trauma, they can often make poor decisions that can lead to abuse and neglect. And we know that helping parents to develop positive bonding and parenting skills, increasing informal and formal supports, and accessing appropriate services can help address and mitigate abuse and neglect. And so today's presentation is focused on JWB programs, but we certainly acknowledge that our local child welfare system is overwhelmed, stressed, and understaffed. And we also acknowledge that COVID and the pandemic has had a great impact on how services have been delivered and how families have been engaged. And so data for the next few years, and I know Barbara will say this and agree with this, will need to be viewed cautiously as we better understand this impact. So as you can see here, we've served over 33,000 individuals, and I will get into the detail of that in a second, within our 26 programs, and we spend over $25 million in this result area. The programs consist of our behavioral health, which is both mental health, substance abuse, our children's mental health initiative, our domestic violence programs, family stabilization, which is our family services initiative, respite services, parenting education, and support. And so when we talk about this duplicated number, 33,000, some of our program participants are involved in more than one program. So you can be in the family support, you can be in the family services initiative, as well as respite. Sometimes we even see families in 3 or more programs. So that unduplicated number also consists of some of our programs like our domestic violence. By law, we cannot receive individual level data. We receive data in aggregate. So that is also present there. Move to the next slide. So with this being said, I invite Megan Seals up to review the demographics and outcomes.
Thank you, Karen. As Karen said, my name is Megan Seals. I'm a senior technical program evaluator here with the Juvenile Welfare Board. And I'm going to be reviewing the FY20 data today for the prevention of child abuse and neglect result area. First, let's review some demographic data. A reminder, we're looking at data that is based on individual level data that we collect on participants. Here, we have a gender distribution of both adults served and children served. You'll notice that 87% of adults served were females. That's a strikingly large portion. In addition, we have children were more equally distributed with just slightly more males. It's important to point out the gender distribution of adults because this represents a historical bias that is based in maternal services, where we focus on the mother reaching out for services and the mother and child relationship. Our newly developed fatherhood initiative focuses on addressing this historical basis in social services, outreaching to fathers specifically in order to engage them in services. Here we have the race distribution for participants in FY20. 51% of participants identified as white, 33% identified as Black or African American, 15% chose not to report their race, and 1% identified as Asian. We see these areas where we see not reported as an area of data collection we'd like to improve, helping participants understand why we collect this data so they'll feel comfortable disclosing it. Next slide. Here's the ethnicity distribution for participants. 18% identified as Hispanic, 80% identified as not Hispanic, and 2%, again, chose not to report their ethnicity. This is a breakdown of the household arrangements for families served in FY20. As you can see, similar to the gender data, we have a large portion of female single-parent homes being served, 45%, followed by dual-parent, 23%, relative kinship caregiver, 13%, single-parent, 9%, not reported, 5%, a single male parent, 4%, non-relative caregiver, 1%. We'd like to improve data collection in this area to better identify these groups. Specifically, when we see single parent, we'd like to understand, is that a female single parent or a male single parent home? And furthermore, hopefully down the line, increasing data collection to understand what type of family dynamic that is, more so than the just female single parent. Slide. Here we have the income ranges for participant. 31% chose not to report their income to JWB. Although this is not a required field to receive services, again, we want to help programs have conversations with participants to help them understand why we collect this data and what we use it for. 21% reported no income at all, and 22% reported an annual income of less than $20,000. Next slide. So let's review the outcomes for this result area. As Karen said, today we're going to focus on parenting skills and the prevention of child abuse and neglect. Here we have a measure called the Adolescent Index Parenting Inventory. This is a specific tool that 4 of our parenting programs use. We do have other parenting programs that are using specific tools related to their curriculum, and we're working to better produce roll-ups of this data so we can have more cross-cutting measures across the portfolio. But today we'll focus on the 4 programs that have cross-cutting measures. Research tells us, I'm sorry, can you go back? I paused and she hit. Research tells us that increased parenting skills can mitigate the risk of child abuse and neglect. The AAPI, which is the Adult Adolescent Parenting Inventory, is the tool that we're using to measure that here. I'll review each construct. There's a total of 5 for the results of FY20. The first construct, expectations of children, is the caregiver having realistic expectations of their children at the various levels, stages of development. For instance, it's not a realistic expectation for a 2-year-old to manage their impulse control. So helping parents understand the realistic expectations for children. 83% achieved this target for FY20, a 1% increase from the prior year. Parental empathy towards children's needs. This is the idea that the parent is able to put the children's needs in front of their own and create an environment that is emotionally, intellectually, and socially supportive for growth. 84% of caregivers achieved this target, a 9% trend up from the prior fiscal year. The third construct, use of corporal punishment, examines parental attitudes related to physical punishment not being an appropriate means for discipline. 92% of adults achieved this target, and this is a 5% increase from the prior fiscal year. The fourth construct, parent-child family roles, looks at appropriate roles between the parent and child. This is where children are not assuming parent roles, such as caring for their parent, making decisions, or comforting them. Rather, the parent is providing this for the child. A 93% achieved this target, a 10% increase from the prior fiscal year. The final construct is children's power and independence. This assesses the belief that children are permitted to use their power and independence to explore, ask questions, and have opinions themselves. 85% of adults achieved this target, a 6% increase from the prior fiscal year. Although we know in these parenting attitudes and beliefs are known to mitigate the risk of child maltreatment, to enforce these results, we also look if maltreatment in fact did occur. Next slide. Using the Florida Safe Families Network data, we evaluate whether any case of abuse or neglect, a verified abuse or neglect occurred during services 1 year after services. On the chart displayed here, the orange bars represent the results for during services, and the blue bars represent 1 year after services. In FY20, 97% of participants were not involved in any verified case of abuse or neglect. And 1 year following services, 96% of participants were not involved in any case of verified abuse or neglect. These results are consistent with the 2 prior fiscal years. And what we see, not only do we have positive results during services, but lasting effects up to 1 year after services. In addition, looking at verified maltreatment, we also evaluate whether an out-of-home placement occurred, both during services and after services. Again, the orange bar represents during services, and the blue bar represents 1 year after services. 99% of participants had no out-of-home placement during services, and 98 had none 1 year after services. Again, here, we see durability in our results up to 1 year after services. As Karen mentioned, and given most of the roles that you play within the community, you're probably well aware of the stress system that the child welfare system is in Pinellas County. Yet the results I've presented here today, we're reporting nearly 100% of our participants are free from abuse or neglect. So you may ask yourself, where's the disconnect? What we know is that these programs are effective if families are willing to engage. But that's the key. High-risk families are some of the most challenging to engage in services. Accepting services, especially home visiting services, like some of these programs we've talked about today, creates a real fear for them that allowing someone in the home could result in their child being removed, the very thing we're looking to prevent. With that being said, we continue to look for creative ways to engage these high-risk families, as each family we are able to connect in services is likely one less that will enter a very stressed child welfare system. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen to talk about specific strategies within our strategic plan for this result area.
Thank you, Megan. So as we see, as families, as Megan pointed out, that as families who are in our programs and engaged in our programs, we are seeing very positive results. And our first strategy is how can we work more collaboratively with our child welfare system in targeting those high-risk families. So some of the things that happened this year is that our kinship program, which is our relative and non-relative caregiver program, they are now working very closely with our child protection teams to really understand and see, is there a way that their services can connect as early as possible in those investigations to prevent that child from entering into the system and staying with a relative or non-relative caregiver. And so this has been recently implemented, and so we will be monitoring and evaluating to see, are these families engaging in this, and are we having an impact? Another thing that occurred over this last year is we increased positions at our OB/GYN offices, serving some of our most high-risk mothers and families. And so what we find there is that our participants, we're finding increase in referrals and participation in our programs, both Healthy Families and Nurse Family Partnership. And so in trying to really engage those families as early as possible. And lastly, we have our 0 to 3 think tank headed up by Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez. And there is an implementation team and strategy team that's working on creative, innovative solutions. And when we think about the home visiting programs, maybe it's not the first 3 times that you meet with a family that they're willing to have you come inside their home. Maybe it's meeting them out in the community somewhere, and maybe it's the 5th time that they finally will say, okay, it's building that trusting relationship. That's very critical. Our next strategy is the research of evidence-based and evidence-informed programming to procure and implement high-quality respite services. One of the things we know is that children that are entering into the child welfare system, a high number of them are under the age of 5. So there is a work group internally at JWB that we've done a survey with providers and community to really understand some of the needs in terms of respite services. And so we will be coming back to the board next month with a draft of a scope of work, looking at not just in-home respite services, but other options for families. And I would say that can be group or out of home. Maybe in some cases it might be overnight respite services. Then the next one is collaborate with funded agencies to infuse training for best practices and outcomes in father engagement. And back in June, a presentation was done and the board awarded funding for specifically 2 programs, Operation PAR, Motivating New Parents, as well as Healthy Families. And we just recently met with both programs to see how implementation was going. And what I would say was really great is that these programs are working together closely in terms of how they can serve fathers. And so what they are doing is have increased direct service to fathers, direct services, also have created father support groups, and we'll be training other community agencies and providers in best practices in fatherhood engagement. So that's very exciting work that's being done. So as you can see, we have a lot of projects and initiatives that we're working on. We're excited as we continue into this next year, the innovative and creative work that we can continue to do as a community. So this is the conclusion of our presentation, and I'd like to open up for questions.
Dr. Grego?
Karen, thank you for the presentation. The disparity between female and male there, and then the father initiatives that you've mentioned, maybe we could have as a board, or myself, I'm very interested in those father initiatives to try to better engage the male figures. So are you seeing any relationship between that disparity and some of those outcome measures? You know, you had them in complete bars, but if you took a look at the 13% male and 83% or 87% female, were they recognized in other areas instead of just clumped all together?
Want to answer that? What we do know is that males themselves tend to score higher on that tool that we reviewed, the AAPI. So we have to look at the data a little differently to ensure that they're meeting thresholds as meeting the average level of scores or above average, because research tells us that male figures in general on that specific tool will score higher coming into services versus, so their movement may not look the same as females, but what we do want to see is that they're getting to that above or at average spot.
thank you.
And then I think also what you're asking is, and we can slice and dice the data, looking at
If there is any, not,
the
yeah,
outcomes specifically for fathers. Yes.
if it's noticeably different, if not, sometimes we slice data so much that it doesn't make any sense anymore. So if there's something there, if not, don't make it. Yeah, just curious. But the two, the practices with the father initiatives, I think is very important. And I think we ought to continue to look and see if it's having that impact. I know it's at somewhat of an early stage, or unless you have.
Yeah, they were just recently funded in June, so we will be closely watching that as we progress into the new fiscal year. And if there is a time and an appropriate amount of data, we will definitely come back and present it.
Great, thank you.
Seeing no other lights, I do have a comment. First of all, outstanding. I think I can look at the board members and say, this is the work of Juvenile Welfare Board. This is our strategic plan live. And I know COVID has diverted us a little bit from really focusing on this work. And I give credit, Karen, in a relatively short period of time. You're in your position, and your work prior to being promoted to this position obviously is playing out here. And so kudos around. Yet having said that, I have a bit of a tougher question coming back to a comment that was made regarding the demographics and the number of your funded agencies that are actually included in these demographics. If I heard correctly, it was 4 programs, and you're working with others to align their data so that we're looking at all agencies reported here rather than more of a piecemeal. So just bring me back to that and for the board.
The four programs that Megan mentioned, that was specific for the parenting outcomes, not for the demographics.
Okay.
The demographics, and I don't know if you can go back. And again, the demographic information is, again, for individual level data that we receive. So we don't, again, the 33,000 number includes aggregate. But here you're looking at just below 10,000 for the demographic data that were program participants.
Okay, so let's isolate the outcome data. And so I'm just curious how many funded programs fall into PCAN and how many have their outcomes aligned with our strategic plan and what you're reporting.
So there are 4 programs that are using the AAPI that was discussed today. There are 2 other programs, our Nurse Family Partnership and our Healthy Families, that are using other parenting tools. And then when you're talking about, and that's an area that we may want to look at expanding, and in particular, when we see we're engaging families in the parenting skills, we're seeing positive outcomes, right? So we definitely, that may be an area that we want to expand to other PCAN programs if appropriate. The FISFIN measures, they are, and I would need to look at Megan to say how many exact programs that are. That is probably our largest cross-cutting measure we have across our portfolio.
For FY20, it was about 13 measures. Programs, excuse me.
So I know, thanks.
Susan, I want to say that I think I have a certain philosophy when it comes to I am an advocate for having cross-cutting standardized measures across programs. First of all, it's very hard to assess the relative value of programs when you're measuring them with different yardsticks. And I think what has happened over time in the many years that I've consulted with JWB, we've swung from let's standardize. And by the way, you get pushback from providers sometime on standardization. And so if you don't want to deal with that heat, you say, well, okay, well, you use your data and we'll work with your data. We may wind up somewhere in between where I think that there is a core of required cross-cutting standardized measures. This is what I would advocate. And then if the program wanted to add to it for its own portfolio and purposes. But we are never going to be able to answer the question of relative value and where we get the best return when it's not even apples and oranges, it's a fruit salad.
Absolutely, and as someone who has been at the table as a CEO back in 2013, I retired at 14, we had that conversation with JWB all the time to move our outcomes so that we could align with other school success programs. I was in a school success program. So I'm here over the long haul, and no disrespect to anyone at this table right now, because you weren't here with the last strategic plan when we were working really hard to start aligning up our outcomes, using your term of cross-cutting, that our funded agencies would have X number of outcomes that would be aligned.
Absolutely.
For our strategic plan to be able to provide those outcomes. And then there would be other outcomes that the agency needed for other funders or for their national office. I know all of that. But I'm encouraging this board and this staff to look futuristically and say, let's start aligning a little bit more so that these numbers can be more substantive regarding the JWB. What is the outcome and what is the impact of our dollars? And we need that level of alignment with outcomes in order to get there.
I support that 100%.
I feel like,
absolutely.
thank you. Very much. All right. Outstanding work, and thank you. I love when we have our strategic plan come live to our board. I see it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to ask Beth to give us more of a brief executive officer update, and then we'll quickly move on to the close of our meeting before trim.
But before we do that, if we can we do an overlap of the Finance Committee to approve what was outstanding from the Finance Committee so that that board can finalize and clean up all the, anything left on?
So I'll be brief, and then we can
Yes.
have the Finance Committee. We have mentioned it, but I want to make sure I say again, we welcome Karen Bogus to a new position for her within the organization. She has played a variety of roles before and done them all beautifully. But Karen has been promoted to the Chief Program Officer position. I would want you all to know there were over 160 applicants, many of them really excellent, and Karen rose to the top. And we're really pleased already in what she's been able to do in that position. So yay. Would want to say that our work from home versus working here in the office, given where COVID numbers are in our community, our employees continue to really not be comfortable working in fairly tight spaces, which is what we have in a lot of places in our space. They have appreciated the ability to work from home. They've been very efficient in completing work. There are a lot of deliverables, so to speak, that are very measurable and time sensitive that we're able to monitor and know whether somebody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know, I do think, and many of you have, I'm sure, have opinions on it, that we've gone through this for 18 months, and there is something lost in the personal relationships we have with each other, and sometimes that results in friction or conflict that might not happen if there were more casual ways to pop into somebody's cubicle or walk across to somebody's office and that sort of thing. So we're mindful of COVID, and we're going to continue to be safe, be productive. But as soon as we feel that we can bring folks back in probably in smaller groups, not everybody on staff, but department by department, so there's plenty of space for everybody. We want to do that. And when we do that, my thinking is that, they have a department meeting that might only be an hour and a half during that day, but that employees then commit to stay here the rest of the day. So there's that opportunity within the department to have more casual conversations. You all are seeing it, I am sure. We are certainly seeing within our funded agencies, not just in our staff, but in our funded agencies, just a sense of weariness. As you can imagine, virtually all of our funded agencies are struggling to keep their staffing numbers up, whether it's early learning or it's mental health or any of the other things we do. They're all feeling the stress of COVID. Many are dealing with family issues of health, whether it's COVID or something else, and dealing with the barrage of issues that their clients have. And it's just wearing people out. That is probably not news to any of you, but I would just want to share that on behalf of so many of our agencies. And yet, they put their head down and move forward pretty heroically and continue to do the work with really good result. So I will, I should have put Karen at the last because that's the cheeriest thing I can say is Karen in that position. So I'll do that again. We're really glad that Karen Bogus has joined our executive team.
I agree. Hear, hear. I assume there's no one that has an information item to pull from the board agenda. I see no lights, no requests. I will look at our attorney and ask if anyone has put in a request to speak at today's meeting.
No, there's no cards.
Okay, and I am going to respect Mr. Butler, but I would like to save a little time for a short break. And I believe we have the Juvenile Welfare Board staff anniversaries on There You Go. And I was looking at this list and I see that we have Michael Thomas celebrating 1 year in August. And we go all the way to Danielle Hentz. Am I saying that correctly? Right? 19 years. So rather than the announcement of every single person, I would like to, on behalf of the board, recognize this group of employees and recognize the work that's being done. Today's board meeting and the volume of work that came before us at today's meeting speaks volumes that virtually there's a huge amount of work, quality work that's being done. So as we recognize these folks for their anniversary, I recognize and accept what Beth just mentioned. We're all weary. Whether the hope was to get back and travel, our family, our friends, loved ones worrying about boosters, third boosters, worrying about masks. I'm looking at Dr. Grego. I was with a chief of staff from Manatee County Schools last evening, coming off of a board meeting, and I just know the frustration that's out there, even on behalf of our school boards. So the public at large, there's just so much going on. But as we wind down today's meeting, I just want to make sure there's no other final comments before we adjourn and give our board members a few moments of break.
Well, we can adjourn this meeting and then we'll have our
And
finance committee.
I understand that we,
But if we do that, then don't we have to reopen the finance,
Yes.
don't we have to reopen the board meeting? So we
No.
can just overlap it, we don't have to do that?
No, they're separate meetings, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
we'll
so
finish
I'm
board
gonna
and then we'll
call
go to
for the
finance.
adjournment of our Juvenile Welfare Board meeting.
Second.
Okay, then I assume we'll get a vote, all approved, and now we'll open
Approved.
up, we'll turn it over to
Okay.
Mike McCurrick for our
I'll
finance.
call the Finance Committee meeting to order. We have one item for action, and that is the approval of the Finance Committee minutes from August 12th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor? The Finance Committee meeting is now adjourned.
Okay.
Okay?
Perfect.
And we'll see you back here, board members, please, at 5:15.
I